So I'm doing something about Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of Normandy through France, and during World War II, and it helped to secure the Western Front against Germany. Operation Overlord was a plan derived by the Big Three when they met at the Tehran Conference in Iran from November 28th to December 1st of 1943. The Big Three were Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin, the leader of Great Britain, United States, and the Soviet Union, respectively. During the initial invasion, they were able to learn from mistakes through a previous amphibious assault. This one is not known as well as D-Day. It was Dieppe, and it was the invasion of France, again, using Canadian soldiers. And yes, Canada was part of World War II. No, not many people know that either. This was a complete disaster, though, and there was no planning, because nothing like this had ever been attempted. They stormed a heavily secured fortress on a beach, and they were all basically slaughtered. The beach was not shelled prior to the invasion to destroy any defenses or lower morale of the German troops. Of the 4,963 who left that day, only 2,210 returned, 916 were left dead, and 1,946 prisoners of war were taken. Veterans Affairs of Canada. The Allies were able to learn from this tremendous loss, though, and they were able to come up with a new and better plan that would be more successful. The invasion began on June 6, 1944, and it involved the heavy shelling and bombardment to weaken the beach defenses and lower the German morale. Paratroopers were also sent in to secure roads and destroy German artillery. For those who have seen or read Band of Brothers, you would know the 101st Airborne Division was part of this. Poor weather and planning caused some problems because there were some technical failures with new material they were trying out, and which was bad to do on a day before an invasion. And many of them were separated from their platoons and companies, but they were able to regroup with other soldiers in the army and were successfully able to destroy many pieces of artillery and secure the roads necessary to bring the vehicles up. General Dwight Eisenhower was given supreme command of the European campaign, and this was a great advantage compared to the Germans, whereas Hitler was in charge of all the military decisions, which was awful because the highest he ever got in the German army was corporal, and he had no experience leading a military. D-Day, the unparalleled Allied invasion that marked the beginning of the end for Adolf Hitler. The Navy provided tremendous support provided the support necessary to reach all of these to get everyone onto the beaches. Using about 6,000 ships, they were able to transport 100,000 vehicles and over 1 million soldiers. The transportation of all these materials from America to France was incredibly impressive because they were being hounded by the German Navy, especially by the U-boats, which were German subs that were very hard to detect. But using new detection techniques, including sonar and new tactics, such as different spacings of the ships, they were able to beat the German Navy and get all of these across Normandy's crucial component. The initial forces were met with heavy resistance. They faced constant shelling and heavy machine gun fire as well as artillery fire. The initial shelling though it was helpful, was not enough to completely cause the Germans to break. You're putting your finger in front of the camera, I can't see. And that was the Navy Sabre Hinds. The Atlantic Wall was on the coast of France, or most of the Atlantic coast of Europe, and it was controlled by all of Germany. And they turned the entire coast into a fortress, and it was very difficult to penetrate through any of it. Operation Overlord was designed to attack the least defended part of it. Operation Double Cross was a plan created at the Tehran Conference, and it was also known as Operation Bodyguard, and it was the web of lies created to ensure Operation Overlord was a success. The true story of D-Day spies, BBC documentary. It was a massive spy plan, and if it had failed, everyone who was sent to D-Day would have lost. They would have all been killed. It would have been a slaughter. But if it was a success, they would have been able to break into France and then slowly start retaking Europe. Every single spy that was in England at the time had been located, found, captured, and then turned into a double agent. Every single spy. And the Germans' top 5 spies were given pieces of information that would convince Hitler that the invasion would be at Calais, France, rather than Normandy. Additionally, fake radio signals and commands were sent out so that any Germans who would be listening would think Calais would be the intended target. Lastly, in Kent, a massive army was being assembled, or so any German spy planes would have thought. The massive army was completely made up by Hollywood. They used incredibly realistic inflatable tanks, trucks, and planes, and they were moved around such as this to give the appearance of realism. At the head of this incredibly formidable army was General Patton, who was one of Hitler's greatest threats. Hitler feared him the most. His nickname was Old Blood and Guts, and he was the general that was successful in capturing Commander Rommel in Operation Torch. And Commander Rommel was Desert Fox, who was one of Germany's greatest commanders during the time. He was quoted as saying, "May God have mercy upon my enemies, because I won't." And he was an intense commander, often criticized for his aggressive behavior. But he was incredibly helpful in this bluff that would help win the battle. The official website of General George S. Patton, Jr. Prior to the invasion, Hitler had ordered the reinforcement of Normandy using troops from Calais. Thankfully, one of the spies was able to leak information to a German spy master that encouraged him to keep the troops at Calais. There were 5 landing spots at D-Day: Juneau, Utah, Omaha, Gold, and Sword. The Americans attacked Utah and Omaha. The British attacked Gold and Sword, and the Canadians attacked with the help of the British at Juneau. The Americans were led by General Omar Bradley, and the British were led by General Bernard Montgomery. On the first day of the invasion, about 10,000 troops were killed. Over half were Americans. Omaha Beach was one of the most heavily defended of the beaches attacked that day. It was on a bluff, which meant the slope was very high, and it had the most defenses. White House, Normandy fact sheet. Operation Overlord. A little clip from. This was color footage, which was rare at the time, of them actually getting out of Normandy. Many of these troops were sent. No, bad. Sorry, I did not do that. I was practicing with it. All right. Operation Overlord was one of the biggest military operations conducted, and thankfully proved to be one of the most successful. It involved careful strategic planning, as well as lessons learned at Dieppe, and the sacrifices of the Canadian troops there. It relied heavily on the web of lies created to trick the Germans, but most importantly relied on the soldiers who charged out of their boats facing near certain death.